made that decision? Well, in and around the year 1519, there was a vacancy for a Holy Roman Emperor, right? And you had a number of kings contending with each other for that position. One of them was Henry VIII. By this time, Henry VIII had not yet jumped out of the Catholic Church and so on. Henry VIII was one of them. Another one was King Francis I, who was King of France. Right? Francis I wanted this thing very badly. Right? Wanted it very badly. The Pope made his ruling, and he chose a Spanish prince as the Holy Roman Emperor. That Spanish prince was Charles V. What was his name? Charles V. Oh. Another Pope, Alexander VI, in 1493, gave Spain the entire Western Hemisphere. Now there is an area within Europe under the jurisdiction, the titular jurisdiction of the Pope. The Pope is the elector of the Holy Roman Empire. And when he chooses an emperor, he chooses an emperor from which nation? From Spain. So Spain has the Western Hemisphere, all of the Western Hemisphere, and in Europe, Spain is given the emperorship. I, Francis I, am a faithful Catholic monarch too. It seems as though the Vatican, although it's two separate popes, is favoring Spain and disfavoring France. Spain has all of the Western Hemisphere already. Now, in addition to that, Spain will get more in terms of the Holy Roman Empire. Francis I was livid with anger after having been looked over by the Pope for the position of Holy Roman Emperor. And you know what Francis I, in terms of very withering sarcasm, put this question to the Pope. Show me the clause, C-L-A-U-S-E. Show me the clause in Adam's will upon which basis you would have made the decision that you made. Adam's will. Who Adam you think he was talking about? The clause in Adam's will. Who Adam? Adam. Who is the most famous Adam? Adam in the Garden of Eden, right? Adam, who was made by God himself, and God breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living soul. And then God said to him, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and he gave him charge over the earth. So God gave to Adam the earth, right? Gave Adam the earth. This is what Francis I was actually suggesting. That in order for Spain to be favored to the extent that it is, and for France to be disfavored to the extent that it is, it has to be that in the Vatican there's a copy, a physical copy of the final will and testament of Adam. It has to be that the Pope is the executor of Adam's will. Now I said it's high sarcasm. Of course he knows that Adam left no will and testament. Alright? But it has to be that the Pope is the executor of Adam's will. It has to be that Adam wrote in his will, give all of these things to Spain and give nothing to France. Alright? So that for Francis I, although France remained loyal to the Catholic Church from the point of view of spiritual and ecclesiastical devotion and so on, France's nationalism did not allow France to simply brook and tolerate what it considered to be an injustice coming out of the Vatican. in terms of Spain having this large area outside of Europe, the entire Western Hemisphere, and on top of that, receiving the emperorship of the Holy Roman Empire. So France declared itself to be a challenger to Spain. Right? France declared itself under Francis I to be a challenger of Spain. What about Holland? Right? What about Holland? Now, remember we said that Henry VIII's first wife was Catherine of Aragon, was a Spanish princess and so on. And we said, when we said that, that it was quite commonplace to have these dynastic marriages among the royal families in Europe. So, for example, the last Tsar of Russia was actually first cousin of the Queen of England, and so on, because you had these dynastic marriages across these European families and so on. The Habsburg family was the royal family of Spain. Well, in reality, because of a succession crisis that took place in Holland, Spain became the nation that ruled Holland, and it ruled Holland for quite some time during the course of the 16th century, right? During the course of the 16th century, but people in Holland always wanted to return to a place where Holland was a nation that was independent of Spanish rule. People of Holland had that as their aspiration. One of the things that was occurring as well, now just stick a pin there, we're going to come back to that point. One of the things that was occurring as well in Europe during the 15th century was what we refer to as the Protestant Reformation. What do we call it?
Protestant Reformation.
The Protestant Reformation. In fact, just last year, we celebrated the 500 years since the Reformation, right? The 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. Now, we're not going into the Reformation in any deep dive here. But when you say Protestant Reformation, and I'm counting on some responses, especially in a Protestant Christian institution like this one. When you say Protestant Reformation, who are some of the people that immediately come to mind? Who are some of the major leaders of this Protestant Reformation? No, Ellen G. White was not a leader of the Reformation. In fact, Ellen G. White lived between the 19th century and died in the 20th century. Right? Died sometime in the teens of the 20th century. Protestant Reformation, we're talking about 500 years ago. Ever heard of a person named Martin Luther? Yeah. No, not Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther was actually a German Catholic monk and scholar. Right? And Martin Luther became convinced, apparently one day, reading an Old Testament book, the book of Habakkuk, that really, the text that resonated in his mind said that the just shall live by faith. one of the things that he observed about his Catholic Church is that there were a number of other things, apparently, that the just were required to live by apart from faith. The church had established itself as a go-between between human beings who sought salvation and God, who was the giver of salvation, and the church as an intermediary became a beneficiary of that status and was actually in some ways commercializing that status, selling indulgences and so on, allowing for people to make monetary contributions to the church that would allow them to or so it was claimed, to have some degree of absolution with heaven and so on. And Martin Luther felt that to be theological heresy. And Martin Luther would have come up with some 90-something theses and would have actually nailed them on the door of a chapel in Wittenberg and so on. You read about the Protestant Reformation and you're going to get details about that history. But he was not the only Protestant reformer. There was another one by the name of John Calvin. Right? By the name of John Calvin. So you had Lutheranism and Calvinism as part of the Reformation. You had others as well. But we are very, very concerned about John Calvin in particular. Why? Because there was a certain young man who was part of the House of Orange, the Dutch royal family, and as I said, the Dutch people wanted to free themselves from Spanish rule and so on. And this young man, his name was William. And William became very, very, very interested in Protestantism and actually adopted Calvinist Protestantism. Now, let's unpack the term Protestantism. What is the first part of the term Protestantism? Are you seeing a word there?
Protest.
Protest. What does it mean to protest?
To go against something.
To go against something. I thought you Trinidadians would have said to burn tires in the road and that kind of thing. I thought you would have said that, because that is how we manifest protestation in this country most frequently. But to protest means to go against something. Alright? To be vociferous in opposition to something or some position. Churches that are called Protestant churches, right, are the churches that would have emerged out of this 15th century, right, 16th century, what am I saying? This 16th century process by which the Roman Catholic Church that dominated Christendom in Western Europe was actually challenged. Challenged by persons like Martin Luther, challenged by persons like John Calvin and so on. And as a result of the challenge that could not be resolved, a number of new churches emerged that were free of the authority, of the Pope. Right? Some nations took on Protestantism. Holland was one of those nations, because when after the 8 Years' War, William of Orange tried to take control over and succeeded over the 7 provinces of the Low Country. He started with that and then it ended up going right on to the Treaty of Westphalia of 1648 and so on. But when he took control of Holland, this king, being Protestant of the Roman Catholic Church, in opposition to the Roman Catholic Church, you think he would have subjected himself and his nation to the intercessoria, which was the ruling of the Pope? No, because he was Protestant. He had freed himself and his nation from the ruling of the Pope. And more than that, Holland had an axe to grind with Spain, because Spain had dominated Holland. Spain had dominated Holland before this revolution in Holland that resulted in the reinstitution of a Dutch prince on the throne of Holland. So that Spain was not an ally of Holland. Spain was the enemy. So Spain was the enemy, so we're going to attack Spain. And more than that, the king was Protestant, so he was not obligated to the ruling of the Pope. So we have seen in this lecture, albeit in a very simple, simplified version, we have seen how these nations, these three pivotal nations that would play a major role in shaping the colonial history of the West Indies, freed themselves from the intercetera of 1493. Remember when Portugal and Spain got the Pope to declare the intercetera, they were quite sure that no monarch in Europe would disobey the Pope. But we actually saw in this lecture that within the next century, because the intercetera was actually signed in 1493, as we end the 15th century and enter the 16th century, a number of things took place in Europe that ultimately led to these nations, England, France, and Holland, having diminished loyalty to the Vatican and the Pope, having diminished loyalty to Catholicism, particularly in the case of England and Holland, having enhanced nationalistic ambitions, and as such, freeing themselves from the ruling of the intercetera and opening up themselves to challenging Spain's monopoly in the Americas. They challenged the Portuguese monopoly as well in the Eastern Hemisphere, but as we said, we are concerned with the challenge in the Americas. On the next day of class, we are going to focus in on the modalities of that challenge. We would have looked at what would have allowed them to free themselves to engage in the challenge. We are going to attempt to answer the question, how they engaged in the challenge during the course of the 16th and particularly 17th centuries and so on, making themselves players in the game of colonialism, establishing for themselves large footprints in the history of the West Indies. Any questions? Yes?
This is about the e-learn, where you put up the page and all that, right? We have to read European Settlement and Rivalry by Henry Beckman.
Right. European Settlement, I'm glad you're asking that.
I want to be clear.
European Settlement and Rivalry is going to discuss what I discussed today and what I'm going to be discussing on the next day. European Settlement and Rivalry, people. That entire booklet, because it's a short book,
Well, the next question
is going to be the basis for the next quiz. Huh? Right? Quiz number 2, multiple choice quiz number 2, in class multiple choice quiz number 2 is going to be based on the entire European Settlement and Rivalry. You have to read that short book.
It's 24 pages. No, not 24, but actually,
No, it's not 24 pages. Let me actually tell you, unfortunately, because of how Moodle is, you can only upload a file of a certain size, so that it is divided in. You have about 3 uploads.
yeah,
About 3 or 4
part 1 and then
uploads.
they have like part 2.
So how much multiple questions I have?
I hope the next one is not only the entire book, like this piece of
It's on the entire book, and you have 50 questions. But the reality of the matter is that that is a booklet. If you sit down undistracted, you could read that entire booklet in about an hour and a half.
So when the exam, sir?
Maximum 2 hours.
So when the exam?
When is that quiz?
Yeah.
It's not going to be on the next day. It's probably going to be next week, Thursday, or the Tuesday of the following week.